Tom.
Yeah, Tom Graham, Black Financial Services. Look, if you ask business people around the room at the moment, one of the top 4 or 5 issues they're faced with, we're all faced with, it will be having the right staff with the right qualifications, and skills. Now, with this massive expansion that we're going to have in the hills, which is all fantastic, we can only see that only getting worse. So I'd like to know what the government's doing to addressing those issues now, and from a planning perspective, ensure that we do have the staff and do have the people with the right skills for the future.
Actually, I'm going to address that question to Mark, if I might, and we can come back to the government if we can, just in terms of, we talk about the population growth, etc. It's probably a good idea to kind of paint the picture of what that looks like, and who are these 60,000 people that we're going to have in the next 15 years, and what do they look like, and what are their skill set?
Sure, yeah. It's a growing area, and with that growing business and a growing need for staffing. And I think it's right that the Hills and Western Sydney generally gets a fair proportion of federal money and infrastructure investment, because if we just think about numbers for a moment, firstly, 1 in 5 Australians lives right here in Sydney, and if we look at New South Wales, our largest state, 4 of the top 5 fastest growing areas in New South Wales are here in Western Sydney. So it ought to get that attention. If you look at Sydney, we hit 5 million this year as a population. That's more people. Gary brought up Queensland. That's more people than the whole state of Queensland right here in the city. And in fact, if we just think locally about the Hills and you add in the city of Blacktown, more people live in those 2 areas than in the whole state of Tasmania. So it's a fair whack of our population living right here, and I think we've got to get out of the mindset of this significant population hub up here in the northwest, all getting on a train and commuting to find their jobs or to take up their jobs in the CBD. There has to be that decentralisation of jobs, has to be that local provision of jobs, which obviously there is increasingly. We're all local businesses here, or most of us. And so it is about, therefore, how can we invest locally in the skills, in the education. We're starting to see that, more higher education options here locally, and a lot more investment in that regard. We found in the PSI study that one of the big costs, the sentiment was we want to be adding staff, or we think we will be adding staff, not subtracting staff over the next 6 months. So positive around employment outlook, but negative on the costs of that, a sense that the costs of the staff are growing. So a few challenges in that regard. And I think it's just about making sure there are the skills bases locally. The Hills, another statistic on this, has a far higher proportion of students than the national average. So we've got the educational base, we've got entrepreneurial base. It's a matter of encouraging people to consider working locally, not just sort of heading to the CBD.
Would you like to make a comment on that, Minister? Or, sure, and then we'll move on.
Great question. Let's call a spade a spade. The vocational education training system in this country has been lousy. Why? Because it's been highly unionised. The productivity of the workforce in terms of teaching has been not up to scratch. It's why we have started to drive competition between TAFE and the RTOs, because we want to see courses offered which are more reflective for your business needs than what we've seen previously. Now, we're still not being smart enough about it. I think everybody would agree with that. I mean, we keep increasing the budget towards vocational education and training in this state every year, yet I still hear constantly wherever I go about skills shortages and the very nature of skills shortages and what that means on a region by region basis. If you want to grow the skills in the northwest, I mean, you've got to make sure that your kids who are in, from kindergarten up are being taught to write source code in years 1, 2 and 3. It's happening at Browley Public School in my electorate at the moment. 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds actually learning to write source code. And if that's happening in our education system now, that gives me hope, but it's not happening across the board. In terms of vocational education training, there's parts of the state where it's done well, there's parts of the state where it's terrible. And everybody talks about this great model of competition and everything else, but how many of you have actually had a vocational education training provider come into your businesses and actually understand what skill set you will need to grow your businesses over the next 5 years, let alone deal with the problem of today? So I think it's an archaic system overall. It is a case of innovate or perish. I think the online environment gives everybody the ability to learn every minute of the day. I mean, you can all sit here and, again, go online on your smartphone and ask any question that you want and you will be able to get the information you need. So the very nature of teaching is changing, and it hasn't kept pace. So, look, I would hope that, again, through the Chamber and what you're doing from a business level, we can start to try and reform our vocational education and training system to be able to meet the needs of school leavers. But calling a spade, you've got to get back to those 5, 6, 7-year-olds now, knowing that they're going to be the ones who will be driving the innovations into the future.